Hi, my name's Katie Lamke, and I'm a bumblebee conservation specialist for the Xerces Society, and I also coordinate the Nebraska Bumble Bee Atlas. Thanks in advance for watching our training webinars, and we'd like you to note that these were recorded live and included a question and answer session. We've edited the video for those of you watching right now to make it a little bit easier to follow. Whether this is your first time watching or you're using it as a refresher, we hope that it'll help you learn how to participate in the Nebraska Bumble Bee Atlas. If you have any questions that come up, feel free to reach out to us at bumblebees@xerces.org. Thanks. Okay, so for those of you that weren't here on Tuesday, we're going to be going over how to participate in the Nebraska Bumble Bee Atlas, which is a statewide community science project that's aimed to track and conserve the species in Nebraska.
You want us to just quickly introduce ourselves while you're doing that, Katie?
Yeah,
okay.
Why don't you guys go ahead and do that?
Perfect. Hi, everybody. My name is Rich Hatfield. I'm a senior conservation biologist for the Xerces Society. I'm based in Portland, Oregon. I run a very similar project in Oregon, Washington, Idaho called the Pacific Northwest Bumblebee Atlas Project. I generally coordinate Xerces bumblebee conservation programs, and very happy to be here supporting Katie in her work with the Nebraska Bumblebee Atlas, and very happy to be partnering with Doug and the University of Nebraska. So thanks so much, everybody, for being here.
Doug, you want to give a quick intro as well?
Yeah, I'm Doug Golick. I'm an associate professor of entomology at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. Rich did a great job sort of introducing the project and our collaboration on that. Just my interest in this, I'm really interested in how you learn and participate in citizen science, but I've also off and on over the last 20 years have researched bumblebees in Nebraska. And I'm very excited to be involved in this project with the Xerces Society, and you're in for a treat if you weren't able to attend Tuesday night for Katie's work. So I hope you enjoy and get involved this year in helping us catalog and look at what species we have in Nebraska as our habitat and climate changes.
Okay, so I'm hoping that the screen looks better now, and we'll get going here. So today I'm going to give you a little overview of how to adopt a grid cell, go over the different survey types that you can do participating in the Atlas, and then Rich has put together a couple of videos that are going to show you how to conduct a survey and how to submit your data, which are things that we would have loved to show you how to do in the field, and how to swing nets and how to catch bees and photograph bees. But these videos are the best way that we could work around that. And if we have time after that, we're going to move into identifying different bumblebees that you can find in the state. So when you are registering for the project, I know many of you have
Katie.
already. Yep.
I don't want to interrupt you again, but do you just want to let people know about using the question and answer and all that? Just lay some ground rules for those people that may not have been here on Tuesday.
Yeah, there was only a couple, but I guess housekeeping things, we are not using the chat box today, so if you have any questions, feel free to put them into the question and answer box. Please refrain from using that as a chat area. We want to keep it sort of just free of anything else that's not a question. Avoid using the raise your hand feature, otherwise I will get a fun little notification each time that happens. And Rich and Doug are going to be sitting back answering questions as they come up throughout the presentation. I think that covers it. So looking at the map here, this is the grid adoption as of today. All of the grid cells that you see are available except the dark gray ones in the lower right-hand corner. So our priority for this year is to get those green cells adopted. So if you're feeling adventurous and want to drive out there, or maybe you live in one of those areas, or you know somebody that has land out there, we're really trying to get all of the cells adopted so that we can get a little piece of data from each of the parts of the state this year. So the first thing when you're registering for the Atlas is to go and adopt your grid cell. And when you go online, you can zoom into this map and find out which one you would like to sign up for. And after you've adopted your grid cell, you're going to go over to Bumblebee Watch. And Bumblebee Watch is essentially like iNaturalist, if you've used that at all, that's specific for bumblebees. So this is where you're going to be submitting all of your bumblebee observations. So when you first sign up, it's going to ask you for your email address and you create an account. And then as you start recording your sightings here, it's going to keep track of all the species that you've seen and the different locations and the dates. You can go in here later and look at all the data that other people have collected or see other photos. And it's important that you use the same email address for the Bumblebee Watch account that you use to adopt your grid cell, because that's going to help us keep everything in order. And so once you've adopted your grid cell and you've set up your account, that's when you're going to plan to go out to your grid cell at some point. You can select any region within your grid cell, and you're going to go out there anytime between June and September and run a formal survey. And when we talk about a formal survey, that includes running a bumblebee survey, a habitat survey, and then photographing the bees that you collect. And once you finish filling out all of those data sheets and photographing your bees, then you're going to submit all of that data online. And this is the handbook right here. So if you have any questions, you'll be able to find answers to most of those in the handbook. And you're also going to find data sheets in there as well as the identification guide. So there's two types of formal surveys that you can run that are point surveys and roadside surveys. And aside from formal surveys, we also allow incidental observations. So these do not count as one of your two surveys that are required to participate in the project. We're going to look at these in detail a little bit and then bring up the video that's going to answer a lot of your questions you might have. So first, a point survey. This is just selecting an area that's about 2.5 acres within your grid cell. And the survey is going to be 45 person minutes. So if there's one person actively looking for bees, you're going to look for 45 minutes. There's 3 to 4 of you, it's going to go down to 12 to 15 minutes. And then after you run your bumblebee survey, you're going to fill out a quick habitat survey form. And the pros to these is that it's a longer survey, right? If there's someone looking in the same area for about 45 minutes, you're more likely to encounter more bees or maybe more species. So we get a lot of detailed information about one place. And there's often fewer logistics than a roadside survey because you're going to one location. The downside to point side surveys are that it's only a survey from a single area in your grid cell, opposed to a roadside survey where you might stop 5 times and encounter a lot of different types of habitat. So the roadside survey is the second type of formal survey that you can run, and these might happen a lot more in central and western Nebraska where there's a lot more private land out there. So to do a roadside survey, you're going to pull up Google Maps or whatever you use to map your routes and select a stretch of road that's about 10 miles long. And about every half mile or so, you're going to pull over on the side of the road and carry out a bumblebee survey for 15 minutes. And at each one of your stops, you're going to run a habitat survey. And so the good side to these is that you get a better spatial distribution across the landscape, right? Because you're driving throughout your grid cell instead of surveying one location. These are generally easier to access because you're just pulling over on the side of the road. The bad side is that our roadsides tend to be overrun with invasive plants, and the large part of the atlas is that we're trying to survey some of our more natural and native areas. And if you are going to do roadside surveys, make sure that you're being safe about it. Pull far enough off the road. If you have safety vests, make sure to use those. And then the last type of survey that doesn't count as one of your formal surveys, but once you start looking at bees all the time, you might just want to take pictures and submit those, and we would be ecstatic to see all of those observations come in as well. So a great way to submit incidental observations is by using the Bumblebee Watch app, or you can take photos and submit them to your account online later. And these can happen anywhere. It can happen in your backyard. It can happen while you're on a dog walk. It can happen while you're on your lunch break. They're not time consuming. There's no time minimums, no space minimums. It can take place anywhere. But they don't count as a formal survey because there's no measure of effort, right? We have no idea how much time you spent traveling and collecting this information. And there's no measure of habitat because there's no habitat surveys being done. So when you're conducting a survey, before you go out into the field, you want to plan your route. So you want to look at the map and see how long it's going to take you to travel to your site, where the best location is to access your site. You want to look at the weather. You want to make sure you have gas. You want to make sure you tell somebody where you're going. Figure out all of those logistics before you go out there. And then step 2, 3, and 4 there of collecting your data, photographing your bees, and uploading your data are all going to be explained in the video that we're going to show here in a couple minutes. So first of the planning stage, when you want to survey is any time between June and September. So we ask that you run 2 formal surveys. So that can either be 2 point surveys or 2 roadside surveys or 1 of each, whatever works best for you. Just 2 surveys between June and September. And those can be done on the same day in different locations, or they can be done on 2 different days in the same location. You're welcome to run as many surveys as you want, but we just ask that you run 2 at a minimum. And you want to pick a good day to go out and survey. So bees are a little bit particular. We tend to joke that they work banker's hours, so they're only going to be out really when it's between 60 and 90 degrees. The winds are 15 miles per hour or less, and it's not raining. And when you're trying to pick an area, Nebraska Game and Parks has a nice map that shows different trails in the state, as well as public access lands. You can go on city lands, you can go in natural areas, urban areas, public roadsides and right-of-ways. Just make sure that wherever you're going, that you're following posted rules and regulations. Pay attention to borders so that you're not going from public land onto private land. If you are hesitant or have any questions about where you're sampling, you can feel free to reach out and I can help you find a place or make sure that you're okay to survey out there. And then lastly, materials. You want to make sure that you have your data sheets and something to fill out those data sheets with. You want to have your insect net, your vials, a cooler that has crushed ice in it to chill your bees. You want to bring a camera or a smartphone to photograph those bees. Something to record the location, whether that's your phone or some of you may have some type of GPS unit. You're going to need a timer, something to write down weather data. And then if you want to bring field guides for your plants or your bumblebees, some of you may have electronic apps for this. There are specific examples and purchasing links if you go to the supplies list on page 26 of the handbook or visit the website. And then photographing. Since this is such a key part of the Atlas project, I'm going to touch on it here, but then Rich is also going to cover it in a lot more detail in the video. So when you're photographing your bees, you want to make sure that it has the hind leg in sight so that we can see if it's a male or a female or a cuckoo bee. You want to be able to see the colors of the hairs on the face, so the ones that are on the top of its head as well as the front of its face. And we want to be able to see the colors and the pattern on the thorax, so that middle part of the body where the wings attach. And then we want to see the color sections on the different tergites or the different sections of the abdomen. So if you see in the bottom photo here, this is perfect because we can see the hind leg, we can see the colors of the hairs on the face and the thorax and the abdomen. So sometimes you can get everything you need in one photograph. Sometimes it may take you 3 shots, and that's okay. So now we have a video here that let me pull up. So feel free to ask questions throughout the video, and we will do our best to answer those.
Hi, my name is Rich Hatfield. I'm a senior conservation biologist for the Xerces Society, and I'm here to teach you how to do a survey for the Pacific Northwest Bumble Bee Atlas or the Nebraska Bumble Bee Atlas. They both have pretty much the same survey protocols. So I'm here today. I'm in a beautiful natural area. It's a nice, warm, sunny day. I've got my net and I have some vials in my pocket, so I'm pretty much ready to do a survey. The first thing you want to do is make sure that the site is big enough. It needs to be about 1 hectare. And 1 hectare is about the size of a football field, lengthwise, square. So sort of a football long and the same distance wide. It's 100 square meters. So a football field, including the end zones. Another way to think about it is the infield of a track. If you ever ran track, the entire infield on the inside of a running track is about 1 hectare, or a soccer field is also about 1 hectare. So you want to make sure it's big enough. And then usually what I do once I decide that it's a big enough site is I walk around and I make sure that there's enough flowering resources. You want to make sure that there is something that bees could be visiting. Otherwise, it's probably not worth really conducting a survey, or maybe come back at a later date when there are flowers. One of the things you want to do when you're out pre-walking your site is make sure you're keeping an eye out for inconspicuous flowers. Sometimes flowers will grow down amongst the grass, but they can be important for bumblebees and often are. This plant is called self-heal and often grows underneath the understory or overstory of grass and is a great bumblebee plant. Another important thing when we're out looking for bumblebees is we want to make sure we're looking at all blooming plants. If I was standing here looking in this patch, I might be drawn to the violets, to the dandelions, or maybe to the bluebells over here. But in reality, one of the most attractive plants in this patch has green, inconspicuous flowers, but bumblebees love it. This is a plant called waterleaf, and the flowers aren't quite open yet because it's still very early in the season here. But these little green guys here are gonna bloom into little, beautiful little flowers that hang down sort of under the understory, and they often can't be seen. But bumblebees like Bombus flavifrons and other long-tongued species really love these flowers and will visit them. So while you may not be drawn to them with your own eyes, it's really important to pay attention to what's blooming and making sure that we're spending time looking at all the flowering resources on the landscape, looking for different species of bumblebees. Other things you may want to look for as you're doing a pre-walk around your site are things that may be a potential hazard. You may want to avoid plants like poison oak or blackberry, although it is notable that both of these plants do flower and can be attractive to bumblebees. You'll also want to look out for holes or other things to avoid, like electric lines, fences, barbed wire. Just make sure you're safe while you're doing your survey. You also want to keep an eye out for property lines to make sure you're not crossing from public land onto private land. And also keep an eye out for areas that you may want to spend a couple more minutes, areas with high quality forage that you know are especially attractive to bumblebees. Or keep an eye out for blooming trees, meaning don't forget to look up. There are sometimes flowers that are above your head that can also be attractive to bumblebees. Once you've finished your pre-walk, you're ready to start your survey. Materials that you want to make sure that you have with you before you begin your survey are an insect net, jars to place your bumblebees, a cooler with crushed ice. Make sure you have a timer. And then for processing your bees, you'll need your data sheets as well as a camera. We recommend having a dedicated camera, ideally with a macro function, but in a pinch, a smartphone can work as long as you learn how to control your white balance and take high quality photos with it. I typically set up a station in the middle of my survey area, which has the cooler and the area where I'll process the bees later. And then I grab a handful of vials and head out to go conduct my survey. And when you're conducting your survey, you want to make sure it's 45 minutes long. And that's 45 person minutes. So if you're doing it with a friend, you would do it for 22 and a half minutes. And if you did it with 2 other friends, it would be for 15 minutes. You just want to have 45 total minutes of search time. The important thing also is that when you're doing a survey, you want to pause the timer while you catch a bee. So it's 45 minutes of searching, not 45 total minutes. So you want to pause the timer when you catch a bee, and while you're putting that bee into a vial, and while you're putting that vial into the cooler. That doesn't count for your search time. The other thing that's important while you're doing your survey is you want to make sure that you're associating every bee observation that you have with a flower. So one of the important things about the Atlas project is we want to learn what resources that bees are using. So while you're out collecting bees off of flowers, you want to make sure to record that information so that we can gather it later and use that information when we analyze the data from the project. So with each bee that you capture, you want to also record the flower on which you captured it. Catching a bumblebee in a net is not an easy task. It takes a lot of practice. So one of the things that we recommend is that you spend some time practicing in your backyard before you go out and actually conduct your survey. That way you'll get some competency and some confidence so that when you see a bumblebee during your survey, you'll actually be able to net it. There are really two different ways to go after a bumblebee on a flower. One way is to just swing your net and try to catch it in there like this. The important thing is after you've swung, you want to make sure to turn your net over to close the bottom of it so that the bee doesn't come flying right out into your face. There's a number of ways to do that. I like to do a little flip, but the easiest way to do it is to swing and then just turn the net over 1-2 times. And then you'll have the bee in this section of the net that's laying over the top. The other way to go after a bee instead of sweeping is to just go over the top and drop the net on the bee like that. That way the bee will be trapped in the net. The next step then would be to grab the bottom of the net and pull it up to the top, and the bee will fly right to the top of the net because it's attracted to the sun. Let's see if we can find some bees to practice on. Sometimes you just have to go and follow for her a bit. She looks like she's looking for a nest, so they can be really hard to track. But we can just throw the net over the top of them like that sometimes while they're flying. And I got her. I can see her moving in the net there. So what I do is I pull the net then up to the top and make sure she's under there. I see her right in there, and then I can put her in the vial. Okay, so now that I have a bee in the net, what I need to do is get the bee from a net into the vial. And the way I'm going to do that, she's somewhere in this folded over area. I can see her crawling around right here. And so what I want to do is make sure she gets all the way down to the bottom of the net. So what I can do is I can just take the net and just go back and forth a couple of times and then fold it over, and then I like to grab it when I know she's above my hand here. So I know that she's between my hand and the bottom of the net. And then I can take my jar, take the top off, but I want to keep that cap close by. And so then what I do is I stick the jar into the net, and it goes through my hand here, okay, so that there's no way for the bee to get out. And then what I can do is just sort of move the net around until I'm sure that I have the bee in the net. And unfortunately, my net is very dirty, so it's hard for me to see. But I can hear her. I know she's in there. And usually you'll hear that sound when you know she's in your jar. I know that she's in the jar, and now I can just use the net basically as the top of my jar. So I'm just gonna reach my hand in, and again, I'm gonna grab that plastic vial, and I'm just pulling the top of the net over the top of the jar, so the net is still serving as the top until I get to the edge, and then I'm just gonna slide it directly into and put the cap directly on, and then I can close the top and I can see the bee there in the jar. And that is how you transfer, or at least one method for transferring a bee from a net into a jar. Okay, so now I want to show you another method for getting a bee from a net into a vial. You can see the bees crawling around in the vial right here. And I'm sorry, in the net right there. And I want to get her into the vial. So one thing is a good thing to do. Some people just aren't comfortable holding the net while they do this, so they like to put it on the ground. But you can see if I hold the net straight up, the bee will fly all the way to the top of the net, okay? And then I can move forward. So some people just like to set it on the ground and then use the ground sort of as the cap, and then stick the vial into the net. And then again, same principle. You can pin the bee against the net as the top, and then you can stick your other hand in there and just put the cap on, and then you'll have the bee in the jar. Simple as that. And then what we want to do is we want to take the bee once it's in a vial, and we're going to put it into the ice pack. And it's ideal to stick it as far into the ice as we can so that the ice is completely surrounding the bee, and then it'll chill very quickly so that we can take the photographs that we need to take. Normally, one of the things that I would do in this situation is I would take the flower that I captured this bee on, and I would put it into the jar so that later when I was processing my bees, I could know which flower that I caught this bee on. And keeping track of that is very important for the data we're collecting for the Atlas project. Or in this case, because this bee wasn't visiting a flower, it was just flying around, it's not going to have any floral association. So if I don't put a flower in there, then I'll know that when I process my data later. But if I'd captured this bee on, say, a dandelion, I could come over to a dandelion flower and just grab the flower off and pretty easily just tuck the flower into the jar with the bee. And then later when I process this bee, I'd have the flower and the bee in the same jar so that I can keep track of it. Other people like to take notes and have a notebook, and they will number their vial and say this would be bee number 1. They could go bee number 1 and they would write down the flower, or take a picture of the bee next to the flower. There's lots of different ways to keep track of it. We don't care which way you do it. We just care that you do it. So when I finish my survey, I like to get a station set up to take my photographs. I want to make sure that I have everything I have and everything I need before I get started, because when I take the bees out of the cooler, they're going to start warming up, and I want to make sure that I have everything. So I want to make sure that I have my data sheet and a pencil that has lead in it. So I want to make sure I can take my notes. And I want to make sure that I have my camera. The other thing I like to do is make sure that my camera is set so the pictures I'm going to take are appropriate for the lighting conditions. So I usually will take a cap of a vial or something like that and make sure that I have my camera in the right settings before I get started, so I don't have to wait while the bee is warming up. So I get it in my macro setting and make sure that the pictures that I take look good. So here I am, I'm going to take a picture. And that looks pretty good. You can see here, it looks pretty good. I could probably add a little bit of light. It's a little bit dark, so I may change the white balance a little bit, but for the most part, it looks pretty good. So once I'm ready and I've got the information that I need, I can start processing my bees. But first I want to make sure I've filled out the top of my data sheet. So I have my site name and my grid cell ID in here, along with the date and the survey method, my weather information, and the surveyors and the survey time. All of that's entered on the data sheet, and I can get ready to enter the bees. Now each line on your data sheet here is going to represent a vial. So each bee that you captured gets its own line. So you're going to enter what bumblebee species that you think it is, its host plant, and then the photo numbers that you need, that you took of that bee. I'm going to move and process my bees in the direct sunlight here because it often will take a different picture or a better picture if you have direct sunlight. Sometimes it's too bright. You just have to take a look at the pictures that come out of your camera and adjust your settings and your location appropriately. And I can't stress this enough. I get way too many photos that people took that are out of focus or are too bright or are too dark. And if someone goes through all of this trouble of collecting bees, puts bees in jars and bees in the jars in a cooler, and then takes pictures that doesn't allow me to identify them, a lot of that effort has been wasted. So taking pictures is really the most important thing that you can do. And I want you to make sure to get your settings right and take the time you need to get the best pictures that you can. So I'm ready. My station's all set up. I have everything I need. I can grab my first bee out of the cooler. And once you take a bee out of the cooler, you'll know she's ready to be processed if you can kind of shake the jar back and forth, and she moves pretty freely in there. That's when you know she's ready to be processed. And so usually what I do is I'll just dump her out onto some surface, and if you have white, that's great. It works really well. Other colors can work too. Darker colors, just something that's flat and neutral usually helps pretty well. So one of the things that we can do when we look at our bee, remember there's a lot of different photos that I need. I need to be able to see the picture of the face. I need to be able to see a picture of the thorax. And I need to be able to see a picture of the abdomen, including all of the segments back there. And for yellow-faced, yellow-striped bees, I need to see a picture of the underside of the abdomen. That allows me to tell the differences between some very close look-alike species. So when they're completely out is a great time to take a picture of that underside of the abdomen if you have that species. And in this case, I do. So I want to get really close if you can. And this is why a camera with a macro setting is really the best option. You want to get as close as you can, and you want to take a nice picture of the underside of the abdomen. Okay, so now I can see the color of those hairs on the abdomen, which is exactly what I need to see. Also, when she's in this position, I can often take a very good picture of the face. And it's nice to take a nice close-up like this, because then I can see the cheek length, as well as the color of the hairs on her face and the colors of the hair on the top of her head. I also like to include a profile shot like this, okay? And one of the nice things about a shot like this is I can see the hairs on the face, on the thorax, and on the abdomen. And now I want to be able to make sure that I can see every single segment on that abdomen and then the color patterns there. So you want to sometimes peel those wings apart and make sure you get a nice clear shot. It's okay if your hand is in there, but we really just want to be able to see all of the segments back there on the abdomen. Perfect. And then she's ready. I've taken all of the photos that I need for her. You can see there that her foot is starting to twitch a little bit and she's starting to wake up. But I've taken all the pictures that I can of her. And so what I can do is I can actually just set her in the sun and let her warm up, and she'll slowly warm up and groom herself and fly away. And then I can go on and process the next bee. But before I do that, I want to make sure I enter this one on my data sheet. So because this has a yellow face and a yellow stripe, and you notice that all the hairs on the underside there were black, I know that this is Bombus vosnesenskii. And if you don't know the species of bee that it is, it's totally fine. You can just write Bombus here. And I'm going to write the host plant. In this case, there is no host plant. I found this bee just flying around, probably looking for a nest site. So I'm just going to write nest searching. And then I want to write the photo numbers. So in my camera here, I'm going to open it up, and I'm going to open up, and I'm going to take a look at the photos that I took. And down here, it's going to tell me the number of the photo that I took. and I want to record that information on the data sheet. So these photos started at 2319, and I'm going to write that on here, and that goes through 2324. Okay, and now that's all the photos that I've taken of that bee, and I've entered all the information that I need to from that particular bee on the data sheet. Now I can process my next bee. Again, I can shake the bee in the jar, and if she moves around freely, I know that she's ready to be processed. I can dump her out onto the table. And again, this is not a yellow-faced, yellow-striped bee, so I don't need a picture of the underside of the abdomen. I just need a picture that shows the face, head, thorax, and abdomen. And I can get a lot of that from a single shot with this bee, the way that she's set up. I can get a nice profile shot. And there I can see pretty much everything I need to from a single photo. I'm gonna roll her over on her back to make sure that I get a photo of the cheek length and of the face. Sometimes the antennae get in the way there, so you wanna make sure, if you can, to get the photo that you need. Okay? So there, really, with just 2 pictures, I can get everything that I need. But there, in this case, I can also get a nice shot there that'll show me every segment of the abdomen. And this species here is Bombus mixtus. It's got brown hairs at the very back of its abdomen, that little crescent on T2 there. And you can see it's got cloudy hairs on its thorax. So a mix of yellow and black hairs, and a nice short cheek. So I'm done processing that bee, and I can put her in the sun as well. So now I can write this one as Bombus mixtus. She was also nest searching. And the photo numbers, again, I go into my camera, I press preview, and this goes through 2327. So this is gonna be 2325 to 2327. One of the things you can do when you're done processing your bees is you can actually hold them in your hands. It's a really neat opportunity to get up close and personal with a bee and see how they move their wings and groom themselves. It's a really, really neat opportunity. They do warm up pretty quickly, and it's pretty neat to watch them fly away and notice that even after being in a cooler for a long time, they can go out about their business and just fly away. Oh, there she goes. When you're done with your bumblebee survey, we're going to ask that you also do a brief habitat survey. And there's just a series of questions that you have to answer as you walk around the site. There's some just basic site information at the top of the data sheet, and then we get into the habitat area. The first thing you want to do is decide what is the most appropriate habitat type for the place where you're doing your survey. And you're just going to circle one of those options. So in this case, I'm in a natural area, which is a park setting. So I would circle that. And then you would want to add in the habitat area of the surrounding area. So outside of your hectare, what habitat types do you see there? In this case, I see some woodlands and other areas. So I would include those in sight in addition to the developed park that I'm also in. The next question asks you, how much of the survey area has flowering resources available? And what you want to do there is really just think about, as you did your bumblebee survey, how far did you have to walk before you saw another flower? Were there flowers pretty much everywhere? Or did you have to walk between patches? And how much area did those patches take up? And I don't mean like to be 100% flowering or even 50% flowering. It doesn't have to mean that flowers actually take up 50% of the ground or 50% of what you see. It's really just you can see flowers or look for bumblebees on flowers in 50% of the site at which you're standing, or whatever percentage it is. So how much is flowering? In a site like this, on a day like today, we're probably talking about sort of probably 15 to 20% at the most is flowering resources, as you see here behind me. Here are some examples of what different percentages of flowering resources might look like in the Pacific Northwest. And here are some examples of what it might look like in Nebraska. Then we want to know how many species of flowers that there are. Are there 1 to 2, 2 to 5, 5 to 10, or greater than 10? And by this time, you will have already done your bumblebee survey, so you'll have a pretty good sense of how many flowering resources there are out there. The next thing you're going to do is circle which features you see in the area. And these are all features that are important for bumblebee nests. So did you see any bunch grasses? In this area, I'm in a park that's probably occasionally mowed. There are no bunch grasses here, so I wouldn't circle that. Do you see evidence of rodent holes or tunnels? I did. Do you see any brush piles? Yeah, there's brush piles along the edge here, so I'd include that. There is a fair bit of bare soil here, so I'd include that. There's leaf litter in the woodland areas and along the fence rows here, so I would circle that. Do I see any pine needle duff? Well, in the area behind me here, there are some pine trees, and there is quite a bit of pine duff on the ground there, so I'd also include that. And I don't really see any rock piles here, so I would not circle that one, but those are what those options are. Those are all nesting areas for bumblebees, or areas or things that we think are important for nesting. The next question is all about management. Do you see any mowing here? In this case, I would answer yes, I do see mowing. There's no cattle grazing here, but there probably is some native grazing, maybe some deer. You might see some scat or some tracks, and you'd want to include that. There's no agriculture here. I don't think there's any insecticide or herbicide use, but I might ask the land manager if I had questions about it. There's no fire used here, and there are no honeybee hives. But your site obviously may be different, and you want to answer whatever it is that you have. And then on the back, you're just going to go around and you're going to list the plants that you saw in bloom, the common names, and if you know them, the scientific names. And then to help later, if you need to, you just want to record the photo numbers if you took a photo of those flowers. And that's it. The habitat survey should probably take you 15 to 20 minutes. If you have a lot of plants in bloom or you don't know your plants that well, it may take you a little bit longer. So make sure to leave yourself plenty of time. But we're hoping that this isn't going to be a several-hour-long habitat assessment. It should be fairly rapid, and you should be able to get through it fairly quickly, especially if you do it after you do your bumblebee survey, because you will have already walked the entire hectare property, and you should know the features pretty well by that time. But that's it. When you're done with that, you're done with your bumblebee survey, you're done with your habitat survey, and you can head home and enter your data. So anyway, thanks for being out in the field with me today, and thanks for participating in the Bumblebee Atlas projects. I really appreciate all your help. I couldn't do it without you. I'm sorry that we weren't able to be in person today and share bees together, but hopefully you learned something and feel more confident when June comes around and we can get out in the field and hopefully do our surveys. But again, I do want to remind you that I'm filming this in April, and this is a rapidly evolving situation. So really, please do pay attention to the health professionals in your area and pay attention to your local and state officials about what is safe for you. And also, please pay attention about your own personal safety. That is the most important thing, and there's no reason to jeopardize your personal health for any reason to go out and do bumblebee surveys. If you need to, go do a bumblebee survey in your backyard if that's the safest place for you to do it. We want to make sure that everybody is safe and healthy during this difficult time. But anyway, thanks for your attention, and we'll look forward to seeing you out in meadows looking for bumblebees. Have a great summer.
Okay, so now I think we'll take about 5 minutes here and we can field some questions that might have come up. And then we have another shorter video that's going to show you how to enter the data and take that next step after running a survey. So it looks like there's a question.
I can feed you some questions here if that's helpful.
Sure.
The first question should be pretty quick. Just what kind of camera are we using in the video, and what kind of camera do you use?
Yeah, so we are using a Olympus TG5. I think this one might be a TG6. It's a really nice digital camera. But I know there are people that just get those little macro attachment lenses for like an iPhone. Those can work. Yeah, but small point and shoot cameras tend to work really nicely for this.
And another question about using cell phone cameras, which I think you mostly just answered, is I think as long as you're able to sort of tap focus with your phone and make sure that as you take photos, just check them to make sure that they're showing features that we need to see, that they're bright enough. And if you know how to adjust the white balance or change the brightness of your photos with your cell phone, you should be fine. But we get a lot of really dark and out of focus photos with your camera, with cell phone cameras. So just make sure you know how to use it and use it well. Question about how long bees can stay in the cooler. How long is too long and how long is too short? Both of those questions came up.
Okay. I would put them on ice and finish running your survey. If they're still not chilled, go ahead and do your habitat survey. And if the bee is still moving around, just keep it on ice for a little bit longer. It shouldn't take any more than 10 minutes or so. You can leave a bee on the ice for a surprisingly long time. I think they've been left accidentally in some cases overnight, and the bee will still warm up and fly away.
The question about how to find wind speed if you don't have like a little kestrel or something like that. What's the best way to find wind speed at an area?
Best way to do that is to use some type of weather app. Most of the weather apps will show you wind speed, so you can get an average mile per hour right off of your app.
Someone wants to know, and I'm sure more than one person wants to know, how often we get stung through the net, or bees sting you through the net.
I have not been stung through the net. It doesn't happen very often. If you accidentally grab the bee in the net, it could happen. They are going to sound a lot more vicious than they actually are, and that's just because they're a little bit scared. But if you're careful about it and where you're placing your hands, it's pretty unlikely that you'll get stung.
I have definitely been stung through the net. It's the only time I've really been stung working with bumblebees, just FYI. But I've only, I've been doing this for 20 some odd years, and I think I've been stung 5 or 6 times. So it's not a lot, and I've handled thousands of bees at this point. So it is possible, but it's unlikely for sure.
I'll echo that. I think twice, and it feels like someone pricking you with a needle, and it goes away.
And then a good question about it within I believe, if I understand the question correctly, it's within a grid cell. Should we survey the same area, or should we go to 2 different areas?
If you're only going to do 2 surveys throughout your summer, I think it would be nice to have them in the same area so we can get some seasonal data. If you're planning to do more than 2 surveys, feel free to do them wherever you want, I think is what I would say to that.
And then, yeah, but also the sort of a follow-up question, someone could do, say, a roadside survey on the way to do a point survey and then capture both of that would be 2 surveys in their grid cell, correct?
Yep.
Yeah. I think that's really it. Well, there's a question, Doug, I'll throw this one to you. Are bumblebee nest boxes worth making and putting out for the bees?
Great question. I saw that one earlier too. 2 perspectives on this. If you're hoping to absolutely get bumblebees in it every time, or even half the time, or a quarter of the time, then no. Or if you're spending hundreds of dollars building these things, it's a great project to do and experiment around with. Good way to engage people in doing it. And if you're using scrap lumber or dimensional lumber, we have a design for box that promotes that at our UNL Bumble Booster site. It's great. So there are species here in US don't really seem to work very well with those boxes. In other locations, like more in the polar or Arctic Circle, a little higher, closer as you get to that, they seem to work a little bit better from what I can read and hear from colleagues. So it's a loaded question. I think it's great to experiment around with. Just don't get your hopes up that you're absolutely going to get it when you put out a box.
Yeah, I think the rest of these we can just type in answers, Katie, and why don't you put on the second video? If you're looking for an answer to a question you've answered and we didn't address it live, in the question and answer box, there's an open, well, at least this is how I see it. I'm not exactly sure what you all see, but there should be a way where you can look at answered questions and actually look at our responses. So there should be typed answers to a lot of those questions in there. And keep them coming if you have more questions. Thanks, Katie.
Okay, oops. Let me minimize that. Okay, so here's the second one, and this video is again just going to show you how to submit that data.
Hi, my name is Rich Hatfield. I'm a senior conservation biologist for the Xerces Society for Invertebrate Conservation, and I'm here to teach you how to submit your bumblebee and habitat data to our databases for our Bumblebee Atlas projects, including the Pacific Northwest Bumblebee Atlas and the Nebraska Bumblebee Atlas. To do that, you're going to go here to Bumblebee Watch, and Bumblebee Watch can be found at the URL bumblebee watch, all one word, no spaces, .org. And once you're there, you can navigate around and look around. You're going to need an account, and if you don't already have one, you'll need to register or log in if you already have an account. And once you're logged in, we would really appreciate it if you would go to your profile page just to make sure that you are registered for the Pacific Northwest Bumblebee Atlas or the Nebraska Bumblebee Atlas. And to do that, you are going to click on the your profile name or your username in the upper portion of the window there. So at the very top, you're going to click on welcome and whatever your username is. And in this case, I'm going to click on welcome RG Hatfield, which is my username on Bumblebee Watch. And then once you're at your profile page, you can edit your profile page by clicking on edit in the upper left-hand corner. And then if you scroll all the way to the bottom, it'll show you what project you're registered for. If you haven't changed this before, it will just say Bumblebee Watch. But we're asking that you click here and choose whatever project that you're working on, whether it's Pacific Northwest Bumblebee Atlas, Nebraska Bumblebee Atlas, or some other Atlas project that maybe we launch in the future. And then if you click Save, it'll save that project, and then you can begin to enter your Bumblebee data once you're saved there. So you can go to Record a Sighting and choose Bumblebee Sighting. And then it'll take you to the first page. And this is the page where you're going to enter your photos. You'll upload them there. And then also where you'll enter the site information and also talk about the flower host and other observations that you made. So the first thing you want to do is to upload your photos. And you have two options. You can just drag the photos from an open window into this gray box here, and it would upload the photo automatically, or you can choose files, and then it will open a window on your computer or whatever device you're using, and it will help you navigate to those photos. So if you click Choose Photos here, it'll open up the window, and you can see that I have my photos that are already organized sort of by year and by date. And so right when I get home from a survey, I like to download all of my pictures from my camera onto my computer and have them organized this way, which really helps me to enter my data later. So you want to make sure that you have your data sheet along with you so you can choose the right pictures for the first bee that you're entering. In this case, 2319 versus 2324 were the photos that I took. And you notice there's 6 photos there, but I can only enter 3 into Bumblebee Watch. So I want to make sure to be really careful and select the best 3 photos that I have. In this case, because I have a yellow face, yellow striped bee, I want to make sure to include that photo of the underside of the abdomen, of those sternal hairs. That's really important to distinguish between a few close lookalikes. So I'm going to choose that one, and then I'll choose this photo, which shows the cheek length and the face, and then I'll choose this profile one that shows the head, thorax, and all of the segments on the abdomen. And then I can click open, and it will automatically start entering all of those photos into the database. And it'll show you the progress of all those and tell you whether they're uploaded or not on the far right there. You don't have to sit and watch this. You can start entering your location information, and then you'll get updates with little green flashes as those update. So now you're going to scroll down and start entering your location information. You can either directly enter the latitude and longitude on the right, or you can use the map on the left to enter a location using Google Maps, and it will zoom into you. Or if you've already visited a site before and you're re-entering, you can type the location name in this box up here, and it will automatically enter the location. You'll see us do that later after we've already uploaded one. And you can see there, I just got an update that one of my photos has uploaded. So I'm going to use the map here, and I'm just going to start typing in the location. This survey was conducted at the Oregon Zoo, so I'm just going to type that in. And if I click on the location, it will automatically zoom into that place. And then I can switch over to satellite view, and then I can actually find the exact location where I located. So you click zoom in, and you can drag and drop it a little bit until you find the right spot. And then you can click on the map, and it will automatically drop a pin, and then enter the latitude, longitude, and state into the database. The next thing that you want to do is to give this location a site name. In this case, I'm going to call it Arboretum Video. And you just want to be really consistent and make sure you're entering the same site name for the bumblebee information and for the habitat information. That helps us be really consistent in the database. So please try to be careful and use the same name and same spelling and spacing between the two. The next one is to enter this question, how accurate is the location? And what that's really asking is, how far from this red dot might you have traveled when you collected a bumblebee? Was it within 5 meters? Was it maybe as far as 100 meters? How close to that dot were you? In this case, since this plot was a hectare, I know that I probably wasn't further than 50 meters from there. So I'm going to choose 25 to 50 meters, and you probably would too. Next, I'm going to enter the date. This survey was conducted on April 17th, so I'm going to select that. And then there's that little box right below the date there, and that's a private option. So if you didn't want this location to show up on a map because it was on some property that you own, or for whatever reason, you could just click that private box, and that would make it viewable to experts like myself, but it wouldn't show up on the public map. Then you want to enter the floral host. In this case, it wasn't visiting a flower, it was nest searching. So I'm just going to enter nest searching there. And here you can enter any observation notes if you have any. Don't feel like you need to, but you can, especially since you're submitting habitat data separately. You don't really necessarily need to fill this part in. Here you want to check the photo permission box, which agrees to the Creative Commons license. And so make sure you click in that box. You won't be able to submit a sighting if you don't. And then if you didn't take the photos, please enter the photographer in that box right below that. And then here, if you haven't selected PNW Bumble Bee Atlas or whatever Atlas project is your project, you can select it here just to indicate that you're submitting these to the Atlas project. But it's nicer just to have it as a default, and then you don't have to worry about that, which is what we did on the profile page in the beginning of this video. And you click next, and it will take you to our interactive identification guide. So you can see there on the left the photos that you've uploaded, and then in the middle here is the option where you're going to choose the features that you see. And then on the far right is the possible bumblebees. And this list of bumblebees has already been narrowed down by your location. So the map has already chosen the possible species that could be found in that area. And you can further refine it by choosing the features that you see on the bee. So I can go over here and start looking at some of my photos and see what I see, and then enter those features in there. So in this case, if I look here, I see that this bee has a yellow face. And I choose yellow face, and it narrows down the options and gets rid of bees that don't have a yellow face. And now I look at its thorax, and I can see that the thorax has yellow at the front of the thorax, and then the rest of the thorax is black. So I can choose yellow in front, and then it further narrows down the options. And then if I look at the abdomen, I can see that abdomen has a yellow stripe. So I can choose yellow stripe under abdomen, and again, it will further narrow the options down. And in this case, since this bee has black hairs on the underside of its abdomen and that yellow stripe, I can choose Bombus vosnesenskii because I know that's the species. And then you can scroll down and click submit, and you will have entered your data into the database. And if you have more bees to enter, like we do in our situation, we can go to record a sighting and just click bumblebee sighting again and start entering a new sighting. So you're going to choose the photos for your second bee, which in this case is 2325 to 2327, according to my data sheet. And now that I've already entered that location once, I can select a previous location. So I just start typing in there, and it will bring up all of my previous locations. And I just want to zoom in to make sure that it's the right place. And indeed it is. It's by the Oregon Zoo, and it's in the same area where I just clicked, which is great. And then you're going to choose the accuracy again and enter the correct date of the sighting. Enter the floral host or nest searching or whatever information is appropriate. Click that photo permission box, and then next, and then I'm back to my identification guide. And in this case, it has a yellow face. It has a black band between the wings there, so I'm going to choose that. And then this one has a red tail, so I'm going to choose red tail, and it will narrow it down. In this case, I've got Bombus mixtus. And then I can click next, and my second bee is already entered. You can see how this gets faster as we move along. Choose record a sighting, and then I will enter those last photos of this last bee, which were the photos 2328 to 2331. I choose the three best of them, click open, and it automatically starts entering those in the database. And again, I can go down and start typing the location in there, click that. It will automatically enter the data in the database. I choose the accuracy and the date. And then I can scroll down and enter the floral host again. In this case, this bee was visiting a dandelion, so I want to type in either the common or the scientific name of dandelion, and then click the photo permission box and next, and I'm back to the identification page. I choose yellow face, yellow in front, yellow stripe. It narrows down those options. I choose Bombus vosnesenskii, and then I choose next. Note that if you don't know what it is, you can always choose not sure, and that will just enter this is Bumblebee and leave the identification up to the experts, which you're more than welcome to do. But now you're done. You've entered all of your data in the database for your bumblebees, and you can move on and start collecting your habitat data. So let's go do that. Now that you are done entering your bumblebee data, you can enter your habitat data into the Bumblebee Atlas website. And in order to do that, you're going to go to the home page. In this case, I went to pnwbumblebeeatlas.org. You might go to Nebraska bumblebeeatlas.org or another Bumblebee Atlas project if one gets launched. And you're going to go to the data tab and choose habitat data entry. And that'll bring up the form embedded in the website. And this is a little, I'll be honest, find this a little funky to have a scrolling window within a larger window. So what I like to do is just click on this link here, which will open the form in its own window. And then once that form is open, you're basically just going to be transferring the data from your data sheet into this form here. There is some introductory information here in the beginning. So you're just going to type your name and your email address. Please make sure to use the same email address that you have used throughout the rest of the other projects. So the same one you used to adopt a grid cell and the same one that is associated with your Bumblebee Watch account. Then you're going to enter your Bumblebee Watch username and your home zip code. Then you're going to enter the survey data, and most of this data is going to be right on your data sheet. So the site name, and again, you want to use the same site name that you used when you enter your Bumblebee data. Make sure it's almost exactly the same if you can. The date of the survey, which was April 17, whether it was a point survey or a road survey. In this case, we did a point survey. The grid cell ID. My survey took place in Oregon 22, so I'm going to choose that. The start time of my survey, which was 3:45 p.m. And then it's going to take you to the map. And this is where you can enter the location of your survey into the map. And we want to be sure to use the same latitude and longitude at which we entered our Bumblebee data. So the best thing to do there is to go back to Bumblebee Watch. So if you open up a new window with Bumblebee Watch in there, then you can just go to your profile or go to Explore Data and choose B-List. And then if you enter yourself as the observer in this box right here, you can filter the observations to only see your own in that box. And then you need to find the one from that survey. So here's my Arboretum video sighting. And here is one of the bees from that. And the latitude and longitude where I submitted my bee data is right there. So I can copy that information by doing Control-C, or I can right-click and then choose Copy, or if you're on a Mac, you could use Apple Copy. However you want to copy those data is great. And then go back over to your PNW habitat survey, and you can paste that information by doing Control-V or right-click Paste, or however you do it on your device, and then hit enter, and it should zoom directly into that site. And you want to make sure that it's the same location where you submit it, that you didn't make some error in the process. But for me, that's definitely where I did the Bumblebee survey, so I'm good. If for some reason you can't find the latitude and longitude, or it's just not working from you, you can use this map the same way that you would other. You can zoom, you can drag and drop, you can use this search bar in the same way that you would in the same way that you would a Google map, where you click on it and it'll zoom into it and drop that pin in that location. But the best thing to do is to get the same latitude and longitude that you use for your Bumblebee data and hit enter, and it will enter that exact same spot into the map, which will make finding your habitat data and your Bumblebee data much easier for the team that's analyzing the data. Then you scroll down and you're going to enter the number of bumblebees that you found in your survey. In this case, we saw 3. And then it's going to ask whether you submitted your Bumblebee data to Bumblebee Watch. Yes, we have. And then here, to further help us associate your Bumblebee data from your survey with the habitat data, we're going to ask you to go back to your to Bumblebee Watch and copy the URL from that site. So you're going to go back to Bumblebee Watch, and you're going to choose one of the records from that survey, the same one where you just got the latitude and longitude is perfect. You're going to click on the bee ID, and then you're just going to copy the URL from the search browser from the top here, and then navigate back to the habitat form, and you're going to just paste that in there. So the same Control C, Control V to paste that in there, or however you would normally do that. And then now I know that that's one bumblebee observation from your sighting, from your survey. If you didn't see any bumblebees in your site, you would check this box here, and then this option would never show up, and it shouldn't pose a problem for you. So that's just where you would indicate that you did not observe any bumblebees. Of course, you'd also have a 0 in this box up here. Then you're just going to be transferring information from your data sheet to the form here. So you're going to enter in the temperature, the average wind speed, the percent cover, any weather notes that you had here. So you could say, in this case, it was a warm, sunny day. You could add that in there. If it was windy, you might want to tell us that, or if it was cloudy, or if the weather changed during the course of your survey, you might want to add some information in there. And then you could add any site description that you put on your data sheet. Here I'm just going to describe the habitat briefly, which will also come here. And then you're gonna again, right from your data sheet, you're gonna select whatever you circled there. In this case, it was a natural area in a park setting. And then you're gonna choose the surrounding areas as well. So there was some developed park around there, a natural area with a park setting, and then there was also some woodland surrounding it. Next, it's how much of the area had flowering resources available. I circled 10 to 20. You can choose whichever one was closer of your survey. In this case, I think it was right in between. I'm going to round up and say 20%. Which of the following features did you see in or near the survey area? Again, this has just come directly off of the habitat form that you filled out when you were in the field. So in this case, I didn't see any bunch grasses, but I did see rodent holes, I did see brush piles, I did see bare soil, I did see leaf litter, I did see pine needle duff. I did not see any rock piles. If you saw none of those features, you would just click this option here at the very bottom. If you are filling out this form for the Nebraska Bumble Bee Atlas, you may or likely would, or you might likely would see different options here, and that's okay. Just copy the information from your data sheet to this form. The form will be different at the Nebraska Bumble Bee Atlas site. So make sure you're using the right site. And then you're going to answer the questions about management. So yes, I saw mowing. There was no cattle grazing. I suspected that there was native grazing, no agriculture, no insecticide use, no herbicide use, no controlled wildfire, and I didn't see any honeybee hives when I was there. If you had any notes here about the chemicals that were used, or about the fire, or about how many honeybees you observed, you could put that here in this notes box. Next, we're going to move on to floral resources, and here you're just going to check how many flowers that you observed on the landscape, or how many different species of flowers. I saw 5 to 10, so I'm going to check that. And then we're going to enter which plants that we actually saw. And it's important to note that you don't have to enter into this form the same species of flowers that you entered when you entered your bumblebee data. So remember, when we entered our bumblebee data, we entered the host plant. So we already have that information. We already know that bumblebees were seen visiting it. So we don't have to re-enter those data here. And this is a bit of a different protocol from last year and the year before. So if you've participated before, hopefully this will make things a little bit easier for you. But also, this should simplify things a little bit. And then you're just going to scroll down and you're going to copy the information from your data sheet, and this is on the back of the data sheet, to the form here. So you're just going to enter the common name and then the plant species name. And please do your best to be consistent with your spelling between surveys. There are so many different spellings, especially of common names. And that's the reason we ask you to enter the species name if you can. So please do your best to find out what the specific name is and enter it in there to the best of your ability. And then you can move on to plant 2, and this one was a false dandelion. And in this case, I don't know what the species name was. I'm just going to put the genus down here. I was a little bit lazy when I did my survey because I was focusing on filming and making this educational, so I didn't do my due diligence. So hopefully you'll be better than me when you conduct your survey. Plant 3 was the dandelion, and I don't need to enter that one because a bumblebee was seen observing, and I already entered that information into the Bumblebee Watch database. And then I'm done entering my plant data. If you had more, you could click on these arrows and it would open up additional options all the way up through plant 15 here. And then it asks if you were a volunteer when you were conducting the survey. If you say no here, you're just going to sign and be done, which would be what I would do, because I wasn't actually volunteering when I did this. I was working or being paid to do this. If you're being paid to do this, you would say no here. I think most of you will probably answer yes to this question, and then it'll just enter the next page where you're going to enter your volunteer data. So you're going to say how many people participated in this survey. My daughter helped me with this survey. And then it says, so I'm going to enter 2 people here. And then it says, considering all volunteers, how many hours did you spend traveling to and from and conducting the survey? So for myself, it was probably around 3 hours, and my daughter also 3 hours. So in this box, I would enter 6 hours. If your travel took place on a different day than your survey, you would enter that before. So in other words, if you traveled to a different part of the state, you would enter that here. Or if you traveled one day and then did the survey the next day and then traveled home the third day, you might enter a third date. Most of you will probably just not fill these out because you will probably have traveled, done your survey, and then traveled home on the same day. These are just an option if it was a multi-day trip. And then how many miles round trip did you drive to conduct your survey? For me, this was relatively close. It was probably about 6 miles. And then I have done all of my survey data, and I'm done. And then it says now, by signing below, you certify that all details in the survey are correct to the best of my ability. And so then I'm just going to go down here, and using my mouse, I'm going to sign the box. And then I'm all done, and I can click submit, and it will give me a confirmation that I've submitted my data correctly. Just to show you what would happen if I click submit and I haven't filled out all the data, it will take you back and actually let you know that you have not submitted your data correctly and that you have to fix that before you move forward. So there's a lot of required questions that you have to answer before you submit the data. So you can go ahead and then fix it and then click submit, and you'll get a confirmation that you have submitted your data correctly. And there you go. And if you need to enter another habitat survey, you can click here to do that. And then go on. And that's it. Now you've entered your bumblebee data and your habitat data, and you should be all done. So thanks so much for watching and for submitting your data and for conducting surveys for the Bumblebee Atlas project. And again, I hope you're out there staying safe and only conducting surveys if it's appropriate, and it's your state and local officials and healthcare professionals have agreed that it's the right thing to do, and you feel like it's best for your personal health, or you feel like it's okay for your personal health to go out and do this. Again, please don't jeopardize yourself to do bumblebee surveys. We've got time in front of us to do that, and we can come back to this. The most important thing is that you and your community stay healthy and safe. So again, thank you so much for participating today, and thanks so much for collecting and submitting your data for us. Take care.
Okay, sorry to anybody who heard my cat try and jump in there at the end of the video. I guess it's witching hour for her. So it's getting pretty close to the end, so we'll see if there's any questions after that. Otherwise, we will just jump right into BID.
There are no open questions right now, Katie, because the video was just so excellent, I guess.
It was perfect, yeah. Everybody understands everything. Great job, Rich. Okay, let me share the screen here again for the PowerPoint. So when we first started jumping into BID, the first thing you want to know is if you have a bee or not, right? So there's a lot of insects out there, particularly some of our flies and moths. Oh, what's happening here? Let me try that again. Doesn't like to share with that video there. Okay, here we go. So there's lots of mimics out there that can look a lot like bumblebees. Most of these are going to be flies or moths, like I said. And on this slide, there's actually only one bee, which is Bombus bifarius here. The rest of the insects that you see in these photos are all different types of flies. So when you're first starting out and you want to figure out if you have a bee or a fly, there's a couple of different things that you can look at. The first is the number of wings. Bees are going to have 4 wings and flies are only going to have 2. Bumblebees are also going to be carrying large pollen baskets, or they're going to have that corbicula, that triangular shiny area on their hind leg. And flies are going to have more of like a chicken leg. They're not adapted to carry these large amounts of pollen. Your bumblebees are going to be a lot hairier and more robust a lot of times than flies. So there are some very hairy flies, as we saw in the slide before. And your bumblebees are going to have longer antennae. So if you look at the fly in the bottom picture there, it has short, stubby antennae. And then the last thing that you can look at are the eyes. So flies tend to have these large, bulgy, like almost animated type eyes. When you think of an insect and you think of all the different lenses that they're seeing through, flies are going to have eyes that look like that, whereas bees are going to have their eyes on the side of their head. The other insect that you want to be aware of when you're collecting are carpenter bees. These can look very, very visually similar to a bumblebee because of their size and the coloration, and we get a lot of submissions of these on Bumblebee Watch because people mistake them for bumblebees all the time. So to tell the difference between these two, carpenter bees are going to have a shiny abdomen. They're not going to have too many hairs on their abdomen compared to your bumblebees that are going to be really hairy. Carpenter bees are also going to have hairs on their hind legs. So instead of having that hollowed out pollen basket, they're actually going to have hairs on their hind leg that collect the pollen. And your male carpenter bees are going to have a yellow mask on their face. So when we were talking about identifying your bumblebees and taking photos of them, bees are going to have very hairy faces, whereas carpenter bees aren't going to have too many hairs on their face. But if they do have color, it's going to be more of like a mask. It's not made of hairs, but it's part of their exoskeleton. And then, as the name suggests, carpenter bees are going to nest in hardwood rather than in a colony in some type of messy area. So when we go into bumblebees, most of these bees, relative to other insects and bees in general, are going to have large, robust bodies that are very hairy. Most of them are going to be black and yellow, but there are going to be some species that have red or orange or brown on them. Most of the species in Nebraska that have orange on their body are going to be found west of North Platte. And like we've mentioned, bumblebees are going to have that pollen basket or a corbicula, which is the section on their hind leg where they collect all the pollen. So a couple of things to be aware of is that there is variation between the different cases. So your queens might look a little bit different from your workers, who might look a little bit different from your males. And that can be a difference in color pattern, it can be a difference in size, and it can be a difference in their period of activity. So most of the bees that we've been seeing out in the past month or so have all been queens. But in the next coming weeks, all through summer, most of the bees that we're going to be surveying and collecting are going to be worker bees because they're going to be the most abundant out on the landscape. And then come late summer, early fall is when you're going to see a lot of your male bees out on the landscape. So when you're looking to identify a bee, I know Rich made it sound really simple in that last video of, oh yeah, you just click the colors of the hair on the thorax and the head, and then you know it's this bee. That probably went right over the top of some of you guys' head, but it is pretty simple once you start paying attention to it. It's just like learning to identify your plants or identifying your birds. You just have to know where you're looking. So to start, you want to look at the colors of the hairs on the head, and that's on front of the face and on top of the head. So you can see in this photo, the bee has black hairs on the front of its face and yellow hairs on the top of its head. Then you want to look at the colors of the hair on the thorax, which is where the wings attach and all 6 legs. So you want to see, is it mostly yellow? Is it mostly black? Is there a circle? Is there a band? Just notice what's going on in that section of the body. And then you want to take that into account with the color on the abdomen. And when we talk about the abdomen, it's broken up into 6 different sections, and each one of those sections is called a tergite. So tergite 1, or T1, is a section of the body that's connected to the thorax. And tergite 6, or T6, is all the way down at the bottom where you would find the stinger. So each one of these sections could have a different hair color pattern on it. So when you pull up the Bumblebee ID guide, this is the one that's designed for the Atlas. It has all the species that might occur in the state, as well as some that you might find if you're sampling near one of the borders of Nebraska. And it's broken up based on their color pattern. So you see in that top left group there, it's bees that might have red or orange on the body. Below that are the bees that have white on the body. And below that are bees that have yellow stripes on them. You can see that we have quite a few in our area that have black tails. And then your cuckoo bees are at the bottom. And then there's a group of species that you might find if you're, again, near a border of Nebraska. So the first one that we're going to look at is Bombus impatiens, or the common eastern bumblebee. This was the most commonly collected bee last year. The key to this one is that it only has yellow on its first abdominal segment. The next one is Bombus griseocollis, or the brown-belted bumblebee. This again was a very commonly collected bee last year, pretty widespread throughout the US. The key that I look at for this one is the shape of the color on that second tergite. So it has a crescent shape to it, and that crescent is either going to be brown or sometimes it's yellow. And this bee has a buzz cut. So some of our bees have long hairs and they look sort of shaggy. But this bee is very groomed, it's very well kept, it has very short, even hairs that make it pretty easy to identify once you start picking up on these features. Next is Bombus bimaculatus, or the 2-spotted bumblebee. And the key for this one is that it has that yellow W shape on the second abdominal segment. So if you look in the photo here, you can see that yellow W on its abdomen, and that's key for this species. And we have Bombus fervidus, or the yellow bumblebee. This one is going to have black hairs on the front of its face and the top of its head, and then the majority of its body is going to be yellow. Bombus pennsylvanicus, or the American bumblebee. Again, this is another commonly collected one, but in some parts of its range, it is declining. In our area, many of these bees, on their first abdominal segment, it's going to be half black and half yellow. And it's very similar to Bombus oracomis, or the black and gold bumblebee. And so the way to tell these two apart is that Pennsylvanicus has black hairs on the top of its head, compared to oracomis, this species here, which has yellow hairs on the top of its head. So again, these two can look very, very similar, Pennsylvanicus and oracomis. So if you do collect a bee that looks something like this, make sure you're getting a nice picture so that you can see the colors of the hair on the top of the head. Pennsylvanicus is going to have black, and oracomis is going to have yellow. Next, we have Bombus fraternus, or the southern plains bumblebee. This is a species of conservation concern. So we know that this one is in decline. Last year, volunteers observed 14 different individuals of this species all across the state. And the interesting thing about this one is that it has hairs on T1 and T2 that lay very, very flat against the abdomen. It almost looks like they're greased back. These are a relatively larger species too. Next we have Bombus huntii, or a Hunt's bumblebee. And this is one of those beautiful species. It has orange color bands on it. Again, you're only going to find this one west of North Platte. And then we have Bombus occidentalis, or the western bumblebee. Again, this is a species of conservation concern that has seen some very sharp decline. The way to recognize this one is it has yellow in front of its wings, or on its shoulders, if you will. And then it has white or gray hair on segment 5. And this one is only going to be found out west, but it hasn't been detected in Nebraska since about 2002 to maybe 2006 or so. But it is a species of priority for us. And so if you are adopting one of these grid cells here highlighted in blue out in northwestern Nebraska, you are going to be within range of where this bee might still exist. So keep an eye out for that one. And again, just be aware that color patterns can vary within species. So not just between the case, but right here we have a photo of 2 brown-belted bumblebees. One of them has that brown crescent and one of them has a yellow crescent. So just be aware that even the bees themselves within a single species can vary. And depending on where you are in Nebraska, you might want to look for bumblebees of the eastern United States or bumblebees of the western United States. These are both free PDFs that you can get offline. Some of you might have access to Bumble Boosters, the ID book that Doug helped produce. The one in the center there that you see, An Identification to Bumblebees of North America, is a really, really nice book. It has full range maps and photos of males and females and lots of identification characteristics. And also the Bumblebee Watch app and website that Rich walked us through on the video. So that was a very quick and dirty version since we only had about 10 minutes left. But on the website, there's a much, much longer video that will walk you through all of the species found in Nebraska. There's one just for eastern Nebraska. So if you want some more time on going through the different bumblebees, feel free to visit the online training portal and you will find, I think there's 3 videos up there, as well as some quizzes if you want to test your own knowledge on identification. And with that, I think we're going to take any questions. Oops, we don't need that one. Yeah, so if anybody has any questions, feel free to ask those now. Otherwise, when you close out of this window, evaluation should pop up, and we would really appreciate it if you could take a couple seconds just to fill that out and let us know how it went for you. So thanks everyone for attending.
Doug, someone wants to know where they can buy the Bumble Boosters book.
Well, unfortunately, we're out. We had 3,000 copies initially, and they've been given out over years. And so I just have a few left. Or hopefully I would, Rich and I and others have talked about maybe producing a new version of that, or updated version that might include updated information on species we find in the state. So I think I would kind of look forward to that. So yeah, I wish I had more of those to give out.
Other than that, Katie, no questions popping up here, just a few kudos telling you great job, which you did. So yeah, if there are no more questions, we can say goodbye.
Email did not work.
Jamie, could you retype your question about incidental bees there, please? If I said something earlier, I have forgotten, and apologies.
How do you record incidental bees? So you can do that using the Bumblebee Watch app. You can just take photos right from in the app and submit it, and that will record your location automatically. Alternatively, you can take a photo using your camera or your cell phone and upload it to the website later on, just as you would your bumblebee data. All right, well, it looks like everyone's done answering questions. So thanks again for attending. Take a second to fill out that evaluation, and we look forward to some bumblebee data coming in. And it looks like Leslie has found the digital Bumble Boosters book available online.
I don't know if that's sanctioned or not, but I'll add a add a link in the chat there for anybody that's still on.
Yep, it is. It's we put it up there for whatever you want to do with it. It won't print though very well. So I used to have a copy people could print and then make their own little version of it.